Here, recording.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for coming today. We do appreciate it. You know, we're trying to update two of our documents to create a single presentation that hopefully meets all of our goals. And it, for the most part, is something we could take with us and say we're proud that we completed it because it's a good tool for our residents and everybody else. So thank you for being here. Just a couple of quick notes. Andy Bird, Hanson's tree service. His wife was called out of town unexpectedly for business, so he's got the kids. So he said, please record, and he'll take a look at it after we're done today, and then kind of catch up with us thereafter. So apologies, but certainly we understand. We do have a hard finish today. As you can see over on the counter, there's a number of nameplates of our city council members. Those members are our Administration Public Works Committee, and they're starting their meeting at 5:30. So I think to make everybody that's crazy during that period, probably end around no later than 5:15, if that's okay. Lastly, my apologies for the tardiness of the memo to receive this morning. It certainly wasn't because of not having good intentions, but just took a little longer to get it on the schedule and get it done. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to review it. That'll be these meetings, so we'll spend some time with it, hopefully. And if you didn't get a chance to thoroughly review, certainly can as part of today's discussion. With that, we roll call. Ms. Clark?
Here.
Ms. Stadler?
Here.
Dr. Rambo?
Here.
Subcommittee, is it? Thank you all. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. And I do have an apology. I didn't remember who made the motion and second to adjourn. Mr. Newberry was kind enough to identify that, and he put Well and Rambo. I didn't think to put council members in front of those two names, so my apologies. We'll add that to it.
I'm deeply offended.
Well, yeah, it certainly caught my eye, and it's like, wow, what did I do that for? So the department has for your consideration the draft minutes from our October 11th, 2023 meeting. A motion to approve. Made by Ms. Clark, seconded by Stockwell. Any changes, additions, deletions, other items? Not. In favor of approving the minutes as submitted, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Next, today's agenda, sorry, I'll break that habit. On today's agenda, we have a number of items. And they are truly discussion items, and I was hoping with the benefit of our consultants, Mr. Guire and Maria, as well as what we'll pass on to Andy Berg, we could kind of go through and further develop those items that were kind of the key points of our last meeting that ultimately led to their inclusion on the agenda. Talked about the goals of the combined document. We talked about the audience. We also just talked about some roles and responsibilities, and then the format of the document and components. And I know to some it may seem like we're jumping into this with both feet, but remember, we had talked early on during the committee meetings and at city council when this item was presented, we'd like to have something done by spring. So with that, it would be nice to have, let's say, a little more introduction, but I think you as a group are ready to go, and we are too as team members. So with that, the department prepared a memorandum that for the most part, as I mentioned, you received today. And what ultimately the memorandum does is it does take those agenda items and breaks them down into individual topics, and then kind of a discussion summary from the meeting. So the first one was just establish the goals, the manual guide. You all did a great job. You talked about it being user-friendly, greater conciseness, better online and social media representations via photographs, drawings, images, graphics, and then appendices. Over the course of the last few weeks, what have you been thinking about in terms of the goals of the manual and guide? It's an open question to everybody at the table and on Zoom.
First, can I say, just a related point? We having a deadline of April is also good because the election and there'll be a new council term. And who knows, we all three may be gone by then, and it would make sense to have it at a clear juncture so people don't have to, rewind, and it'll be 3 more years before we get this done. So
I'll be here still. I'm sure you two will be too.
you never know. You just never know.
Well, certainly we understand that, and just from the standpoint of process to get the regulations updated to now has been a long and lengthy one. And I think the overarching component of all of this is development still occurring. Properties owners are still wanting to remove trees or do regrading of the properties, and so there's nothing stopping for us, and so that's why I think it's imperative to kind of hit that deadline, and you've added just another good reason. So again, we're going to create a short list of goals for our manual and guide, the combined document. What would you like those to be?
You know that I think that they need to be SMART goals. If we're going to have goals, they need to be real goals. Just continue what we're doing. Want to be more pictures, less words. We need to be specific on what we want. What's our goal for the end point of this document? And if we look at it like you were talking as an overarching project, we have the table of contents, and to develop that first so that we can see what are our milestones really, where are these breaks, what categories do we want to list in there? We want to have the protocol of the city and then everything branch off of that. I think it's then we can make goals, specific goals of how to get there, because we got to know where we're going before we know how to get there. And the goal needs to be specific and have a timeline on it, have cost measurements on it, and just measurements on how successful we are.
Can you explain what you mean about cost measurements?
I mean, like, what is it going to cost us to make changes in this? What the document itself, not in the landscaping or anything like that. I'm talking about putting this document together. Do we need to print a book? Do we need to, just all of those things that we need to put together? I think.
Do you need to hire a web designer to put the web pages on the web in a more friendly manner? Do we need to create a document and have somebody who knows how to design a document to be more user friendly? Those kinds of things.
Right. So in my mind, that's the things we have to decide first. What is it we want to do with this? How can we help you? And then we can take assignments of, Teresa, look, you need to go through this section of the old one and read it and see if there's parts that need to be updated. Can we add stuff to it? What can we take out and put into appendices? And we can all take a part of that and put it together if we know what we want the end product to be.
I think as we were closing at the last meeting, we were talking about creating an overview document for the standard residence at the beginning of this manual, so to speak, and then having reference to more detailed ordinance specific information for those in the building world, and more and a glossary that would have definitions on, what is cutback, what is bioretention, what's an annual versus a perennial, those kinds of things, so that we had a reference point. I wouldn't want to include those levels of definitions at the very first, because I'd like us to be able to put together a document that the first 4 to 6 pages could be used by our residents to be able to understand, okay, if I'm trying to do something in my yard, what ordinance guidelines do I need to be aware of, just in general terms? And then we can point them to the page that they need to go to read that ordinance if they want that level of detail. What plant recommendations do we have? And then we can point them to that section of this document. And then I think we need to include in that first part why we are giving these pieces of guidance to our residents, that we want to maintain erosion control, we want to improve the CO2 reduction levels in our neighborhood, we want to increase the beauty or maintain the beauty of our environment here. We want to sustain the animals that live in our environment. Those are all the goals I think we need to have with our overarching information, but I think we need to teach that at the very get-go to the standard residents, so that when they get ready to dig everything out of their yard or something ridiculous like that, that maybe they'll take a look at this and think about it. And then I think we need, lastly, to look at our ordinances and ensure, because I think Andy did a good job of indicating where there were some deficiencies there in the document that he sent over just today. I was able to look through that. So we need to make sure our ordinances are up to date to combine with this. So
Did you share that with all? I don't know that I saw Andy's document today.
maybe it was the day before today.
Actually, I sent it last week.
Yeah.
Was it?
last
Okay.
week.
Oh, okay, same, I
sorry,
thought there
I'm
was something
I was
separate.
looking
Okay,
at all
that-
sorts of different things
I got
before I
that
came
then.
over here.
No
so,
problem. Just making sure I didn't miss it.
Yeah, sorry.
Can I ask a question
Mhm.
about Katie? So I'm trying to jot down all of these things that might be like, the
Categories.
categories, the
Mhm.
breakdown of the table of contents. And so you were talking like have an introduction for like education of,
Educational overview for residents or even for our building community, so that they understand what our primary goals are to begin with.
maybe we just call it introduction so that it doesn't sound
Yeah.
like we're teaching you how to do it.
Yeah.
And then a glossary is what I had, table of contents, the toolkit we talked about, the graphics and the photos,
Mhm.
like a protocol section that would include the ordinances,
Mhm.
the,
I mean, I'm gonna
just, okay.
I'm gonna hold this up as an example, but here's what the city of Springfield put together for their native plant guide, is what they call it. But it's actually, I think, a pretty good document because it gives some graphics on, here's why we want you to plant stuff, so that the root systems hold the ground in place. that's a stellar graphic that I don't think many people really think of, is that by what you plant, that keeps the soil in place. And then they move into, here's the components that it supports. Here's the maintenance you need to do in your yard. And then here's some common problems that you have. And then they start out with developing a maintenance plan on how you're gonna take care of your plants, blah, 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 blah. Garden invaders. Here's examples of them, pictures, and then names of them. And then they go into their plant guide, which is a little bit smaller than ours, rather than taking up so much space on our website. It's a little bit tighter on what they are recommending. And then here's trees and tree planting guide with a section on yard ethics, just, watch what you're doing. And then here's a whole section on resources. In addition to this document, here's places that you can go to besides us or this document. And then there's resources on ordinances for the city, Missouri Extension Service, websites, etc. And then here's their glossary of terms, so that if somebody doesn't understand something, so it's really, I think, a pretty straightforward document for the average user. What it doesn't have is the ordinances for the city of Springfield or anything like that, which if I was a builder, obviously I'd want to be able to quick get to that.
Yeah.
So if we had, if we develop a table of contents that has a connection to, I click on this and that'll take me right to the city's planting ordinances.
So you bring up a good question. I was trying to wrap my brain around it, and what we started to talk about the last time we met is that there's this, which is perfect for the resident.
For the residents.
And then we talked about if there's an appendix that applies to some greater detail, that would be, for lack of better terms, the developer.
Yeah.
Or something, or maybe even there's two totally different
You could have two different
documents. But then you hit, what I was thinking is there needs to be a website or something, because there's a lot of references that we would reference, like MDC. We would just send them to that link, because they're constantly updating it and doing stuff. So while we can address things, we're not gonna cover everything. We're not gonna cover every plant that we would recommend, but then we could do what we talked about before, where we have like almost like a sample front yard, for lack of better terms,
Yes.
and then diagram and say, hey, this is what this is showing, to kind of give them a snapshot of what our recommendations are, or even in the introduction, the why before the what do we recommend sort of thing, because I think that's really important. Otherwise, people aren't really, unless they're already kind of behind this notion, they're not gonna be inspired to look more into it. Maria and I were talking earlier today, just thinking about other municipalities that we work with and that have established some of these guidelines in the past, and their different ordinances. Has Wildwood, or have you discussed before, requiring the developer to have a sign and seal, or a registered landscape architect do their plans? Like on multiple other municipalities, we're required to review the plans or design the plans and then back them up, because we understand some of these aspects. Is that something that the city has considered in the past?
We've done it pretty much since our inception.
So you do require a landscape architect to sign and seal the drawings?
I mean, it's Rusty Saunders of Loomis.
But so you have a landscape architect that reviews them, but some municipalities require the developer to have the plans done by a landscape architect prior to submitting. So not going to your approved landscape architect that reviews everything, but it's another layer that before it even comes to the city, an LA has been required to lay it out.
Process.
So when city council approves an ordinance, we require as a condition that a landscape architect prepare all plans and sign and seal them. The landscape architect submits that with the rest of the plan package. We do a cursory review just to make sure the general information's there, and then we send it to our consultant. Because I'm not speaking for Travis or Melanie, but I don't know enough about plants, trees, and things that are changing in those dynamics to basically do it justice. So that's why we send it. That landscape architect then provides comments. We add what comments we may have and then send them back, and then the cycle starts.
Okay, so that's typical. I just didn't know if initially on the initial design plans, taking Rusty out of the equation, that the landscape architect is required. Because that should help some to them understanding the same language that we're developing in the updated ordinance or the updated manuals.
A critical piece of this is, were you gonna say something, Joe?
Well, please.
A critical piece of this is providing constraints for the landscape architects, because some of these plans, from my perspective as an environmentalist, have not been worth powder to blow them to hell, and we're fighting the invasives and so forth that landscape architects have designed into the landscapes based on their beauty and other characteristics, and not necessarily the best plants for us in terms of managing the ecosystem of the biggest city, the third biggest city by area in the state, right? And so this document should be the most critical thing that I see out of this, other than education of the population in general, so they support such notions, is the constraints that we can impose on developers and so on and so forth, so that we're not fighting, burning bush and silvergrass and all those kinds of things in the woodlands around here. So I had several things to just throw out there if now's the time. Teresa and I talked about this just a little bit, and Katie's exactly right. This is a very nice document. May not work for us, but it sure works for Springfield, and it's it's got everything, the components that we're talking about. But we don't need to reinvent the wheel, and there's a lot of opportunities for I would say ethical theft of these concepts. Look at this one and look at some others and see what other people have done, and then put our own stamp on it and try to extend our philosophy into by Robin from Peter and Robin from Paul. The main thing I had to say though was we should, I feel like as an engineer and a scientist, I can't talk sometimes without a whiteboard. You guys have all experienced that since you've known me. I wish we had a whiteboard in here right now, because we could start working on the table of contents and write down what you said, write down what you said, write down what you said, write down what I say, erase it, move it around, and so on and so forth, and come up with, this is a block diagram of our table of contents. It's just like when we were in middle school and we had to write a 1,000-word theme. It was.
You guys have a marker board anywhere?
We have the large sheets we can.
Giant
That's not as good. I mean, it would work, but it's not as good. We need to figure something out about that. But to finish the thought, we learned to do an outline, and then a rough draft, and then a final draft, and the table of contents could be our outline for all of this. I think Teresa thinks a glossary is critical. I agree with her. After the fact, an index, so that people can find places in the document, because it's going to be a large document. But I agree with whoever said it. I can't recall, but we can have an online document with hyperlinks that go all over the place. And it doesn't have to be complicated, and it doesn't have to reinvent our paper guide. It can just be a PDF of the paper guide with hyperlinks in it that takes you here and there and everywhere. I mean, we've mastered that technology because we have other documents that already do that. So I would like to suggest that we spend a few bucks and get a whiteboard in this room. I've been whining about that since the day I joined the city and before. It wouldn't cost that much. And it would free me up to actually, talk the way I'm used to talking. And I think in this case, it would be incredibly helpful because we're throwing things out. You're writing it down, you're writing it down, you're writing it down, you're writing it down. And we're gonna have 5 different things that we'll have to figure out how to slam together.
Maria, check your Slack message. I just came up with an idea. I'm not sure it will work. We could potentially use this screen for a makeshift whiteboard. We use a software called Miro. And I'm not sure if she could share her screen and we could do that, but that just for today, so that we're not doing that. If that helps you, you wouldn't be able to scribble, but she could scribble for you.
Well, people can't read my writing anyway, but engineers are famous for having, or scientists even more so, having an hour conversation without ever saying a word because it's the math, right? Well, in this case, it's not the math necessarily, but it's the words, and we can, list them
We use
all out.
trace. That's what we do. Trace paper, big rolls of the parchment and scribble on there.
But there's no substitute for having that, collaborative format.
Okay, so that I agree. I think we're all thinking along the same lines to that, and like delegating who to do what to begin with, I think is going to be really important because I know that you have a list of do not plant these. These are the things that we absolutely want to update on the I fight these every day sort of thing. So I think that would be great if you would help with, going through that list and saying, all right, these are the things that we absolutely want to make sure in the ordinance that's not allowed. And so then maybe we could delegate others to, it sounds like each one of you have your own notes in the existing document. I did find a way for us to, she's on her phone. She had to call in, so she can't share it right now.
Okay.
I did find a way, who's connected to this screen right now? If I emailed you something to you.
Melanie. Yeah.
Okay, I found sorry, I'm all over the place, but Melanie, I'm gonna email you a link to the tree manual, and then maybe we can go through how people can comment on there so that we can all see each other's comments. We talked about that briefly, but we tested this out.
Yeah, we should be able to get into the document and comment on it.
So I would also say, just from experience in other cities, like if you have a very specific do not plant list, those are forever changing, and then you have to update it, and it's not necessarily something that, whoever happens to be, in staff is knowledgeable about. We generally went off of like Department of Natural Resources do not plant list or something like that, because somebody that tends to keep up with it more, has a better list of noxious weeds, and then would add to it if it was lacking something, we would add to it, but that way it was.
Yeah, that
Does NBC keep an updated list?
figuring out what not to plant is the easy part. The idea would be more, I'll give you an example. Melanie and myself and some other folks went to the Burmell's place on Friday to look at their log cabin for possible donation. And they have a gorgeous place, a beautiful 1 acre pond, and cool outbuildings and lights of evocative stonework from a century and a half ago. And but they have planted lots of things like calorie pear and again silvergrass and those kinds of things. And there was no, these are lovely people, and they're so careful about the environment that they recycle virtually everything that, you know, they do great source reduction and whatnot, but they were very enamored of these species, even though they're invasive elsewhere, because they served the purpose that they needed them to serve on their land. That there's room for all those perspectives, but I think as a general rule, if we can get folks to ask the question before they're planting, rather than, you know, it's hard to tell somebody to cut a mature tree down, but it's really easy to say, when you're planting, don't plant Callery pear. There are other, you know, gorgeous flowering, smaller trees that are hardier and not as weak wooded and all those kinds of things. And get them to ask that question. And we don't have to necessarily educate them on every possible tree that's out there. And we can't educate them, as Melanie suggested, on what not to plant, because that changes all the time. And so, and new cultivars come out and something that was bad is not so bad anymore, or you can, you know, all those kinds of things. So I would say that it's more important to just get the philosophy. The philosophy is paramount.
Would we be better served to, in the document, speak to
Can you accept her phone?
upfront in the introduction section? This is what an invasive species is defined as.
Yeah.
So that people understand when we say invasive species, this is what they should be looking out for.
Yeah, and here's why
And
it's
when
bad.
when you're culling through the variety of resources for plants, make sure that you identify how fast they grow, where they grow, any kinds of recommendations along those lines that we could give to your standard resident. Since we're putting these guidelines together, this is what we expect out of you. We don't expect you to, for your standard citizen, we don't expect you to be a landscape designer, but here's some basic guidelines that you need to be following and thinking about.
Yeah, and I think that's paramount, because we've got to get people to have this paradigm shift on how they think of beauty of the surroundings. And I think, you know, coming from homeschool moms, you know, you have to change that thought process, not just tell them, write it down and say, this is going, you need to watch for invasive species. You got to make them somehow write it so that it gets in their mind that I want to protect the environment. I want to do this. How do I do it? I'm going to find out, so that they will go to the different sources and find out, well, what did I just buy something that is just because I went to Home Depot and got the beautiful flowering and bushes, and I said, oh, I want one of those. And so I put it in my front yard. And because that's how I would think the majority of people do their plantings, homeowners. They go and they're shopping and they're looking for what would look beautiful in my yard and where's the right colors, and I want this color here and this color here. And instead of, I'm looking at first being whether it's invasive or not. I think we got to be real creative in the writing of this. That's what I'm saying. Not just here's the facts.
So I think Christy said last time, everybody that comes to her with wanting a landscape design wants it to be spectacularly gorgeous in all seasons and maintenance free.
Yeah, zero maintenance.
Yeah, and people need to get behind the notion that nature beaten into submission is no more beautiful than nature left to its own devices if you plant the right things and just let them grow the way they're supposed to grow. It's spectacular, like a natural woodland or a pseudo-natural woodland. They look equally gorgeous as a topiary garden, which is the example I used, last time.
And that's where I just hesitate, because I just don't know the solution on how to get people excited about.
We're swimming upstream. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're just gonna continue to go to Home Depot.
Buy a bunch of mulch.
Or buy mulch or
Yeah,
buy invasive species that they sell there. And so we have to think out of the box on how to continually make them think, like not just one time, but I don't even know if it's something like part of the newsletter or something where it's a QR code or a clickable thing that's, did you buy plants recently? Are you about to buy plants? Remember, remember, here's this list and it gets updated all the time. Go to MDC's do not plant list or we have to come up with something to keep them inspired about
Kind
it.
of a program.
Here's another thought. One time I was talking to, August Bush, like the 5th or something, whatever number he was. And I was at a boxing match and he was bringing all of this beer and stuff. And I'm like, I don't even drink, but, and I asked him, I said, what is it that you do that causes everybody to want your product? And he said, I advertise to kids. He said, it's not so much that I want kids to drink. He said, I don't. He said, what I do is I put it out there so all fun things are associated with, you see the sign, you see Budweiser, you go through Grant's Farm, all those things you see and you're having fun, Budweiser, Budweiser, Budweiser. And he said that is one of his best tools is to advertise to children. And so maybe one of the things we could do is like, every time we have an event where there's kids and families involved, we have like little signs up along. So it just like sticks in your brain, you know, remember invasives, you know, do this, or just little signs around.
It's almost like we need a little marketing campaign to then unveil what we've come up with, you know, like then, so we'll come up with some great deliverable, but then just like we produce great projects, if I'm not out there marketing and telling people about them, then you don't know, you know.
I mean, I could make a coloring book for all to give out to kids everywhere that's got like, here's a good plant, here's one, you probably put an X on the ones that are bad, you know. Do
Or
something
put a
like-
mean face on
mean
that
face,
plant.
yeah. Here's your stickers,
Yeah.
green for.
Wrestle back a little here.
I know, we're all over the place
So-
as usual.
This is where the ideas come from, the discussion, so this is fine. But what I think I'm hearing from all of you is maybe this document just isn't a technical manual. The two we have now, maybe it's more so than anything, the primary goal is an educational tool.
That's what we were thinking. The philosophy is up front and then sections. It can be a section. The tree manual, this is a pretty technical document. Here's how you plant it and here's the spacing and here's so on and so forth. And that is part of that's one of the tools that we provide the developers and their landscape architects. But yeah, the right up front, it needs to have the philosophy. Here is why we're so interested in reducing invasives and reducing cultivation and reducing pesticides and herbicides and those kinds of things. It's benefiting everybody, not just your own yard. You know, and it's a hard concept to get across, but that's my strong opinion of this. And the rest of it can kind of, you know, once we get the table of contents figured out, we can just, you know, chunk it up and there's places we can go. Springfield's guide is a good example of, you know, content, fill in the content.
Fill in the gaps, yeah.
Then could we do something like put in that document that's really the philosophy, the education, and then put all of our appendix for the more technical, all of that in the back. So so it's all one document, but it works for everybody.
That's the direction I think you all want to go. You want to have something that's more of an educational tool that's general in the concepts and will goals that the city has. And then send them to you're a resident to this area, and if you're a developer to this area. And so there's, at least in my mind, three components. I guess what's key amongst this is the theme I'm hearing from you all is it's ever changing. So is there a benefit? I'm asking you, is there a benefit to really create a list of do's and don'ts for plantings? Is it easier just to say, here's the resources we used to review your plan?
I think that's appropriate. I think that's kind of what we were trying to say, in each in our own way, that, teach them to fish rather than give them the fish, because, fish species are gonna change. I might really stretching that metaphor, but it makes more.
I like the idea of, here's how we're gonna review your plan, so at least you then know how we're gonna grade you, on it. That won't work for the residents that just wanna do a small change in their yard and they don't have to reach out to the city to make that change.
But if we made this, the philosophical statement up front, then the developers are sort of bound by that philosophy. Hopefully many of our neighbors will eventually see the wisdom in that philosophy, because we can't mandate anything. I wish we could have, the state of Missouri has a noxious weed list, which you well know at least. But it's a dozen weeds that cows don't like to eat. Right? It has nothing to do with, like, and one of them is ironweed, which is spectacularly gorgeous. If you have ironweed in your yard in about a month in the fall, that's where the butterflies are. But, I had the guy that was cutting hay on a parcel next to me come way over onto my land and spray spray Roundup on my ironweed, because it gets in the hay and the cows don't like to eat it. So that, we can mandate noxious weeds if we want to, but it's just an uphill battle. And the only way to do it is get agriculture involved. So I don't think we're going to have much success in banning calorie pear and so on and so forth. But people are finally catching on to the idea that it's bad and there's better. So I think the philosophy is the way to go.
So I have something, last week, the Missouri Department of Conservation had a regional roundtable of stakeholders that the department attended. And there was a nonprofit there that you may be familiar with, any of you, called, I think, Brain Conservation Home. Heard of that? They do native planting consulting. Basically, they do free site visits or low-cost site visits to advise on. And someone asked them how they trained their volunteer people who do the site visits. And it kind of tracks with what Joe just said. He said, I don't need them to know all of the information. I need them to know where to find the information. And so and they do like hundreds of site visits in the St. Louis region every year. So
The St. Louis Audubon Society, I just found it.
okay, yeah, that's who he was associated with.
Well, the Missouri Conservation Department has a private land conservationist cadre, and we don't, they're one of the best funded conservation departments in the nation, Missouri MDC. It's one of the oldest, and they're tax funded, which was a very, very forward thinking thing for rednecks in Missouri to do 100 years ago, but or 80, 90 years ago, whatever it was. But you can call them and schedule a visit from a private land conservationist if you have a little 10 by 10 plot that you want to plant things on, butterfly garden or something like that. They will come out. It may take them 6 months to get there because they're underfunded, but that's another, great resource. And they take the same approach. Some of them are not knowledgeable on each individual species, but they know what to plant, what not to plant. And they come out and help you, find seed sources and so forth.
So again, overarching all of this, comments have been is that it's more of an educational tool. It's majority of the audience we want to reach. It's a technical document because we are a government to oversee certain things relative to tree preservation, plantings for development, and our own city efforts in terms of what we do on our right-of-ways, parks, and trail corridors. Somewhere in there, though, here, I think the idea, the component, things so that we start early. Follows them through, and they pass it on to their children as well. So I think there's a single document. I don't think we want to veer from that. If somebody has a different opinion. There are many components, which Dr. Rambo's mentioned. That's our assignment for the next meeting, is to come with if we can set it up here, an online document through our Office 360, that everybody can basically comment on a table of contents, what they would like to see in it. Because I think our goal is clear now. We want it to be more educational, less technical generally. And we want to give them the resources so that they can basically hear what we're saying and then on their own discover what we want. And then we'll also then be able to tell the development community, here's what you're graded by.
Is 360 like SharePoint, that sort of thing? You can just, it's really intuitive and user-friendly and.
Yeah,
I'll defer to the experts on that.
360s and the latest version of
It
SharePoint.
looks like Maria has her hand up. Maria, if you'd like to speak, you're welcome to.
Thank you. Yes, so a couple of things that I've been collecting here on my notes, and I'll start by saying that I know that the goal is to simplify and to make something that is very user friendly, but at the same time that in the next 10, 20 something years is going to be addressing the concerns of all the sustainability aspects that we mentioned the last time, as well as invasive plant species reduction. So with that in mind, with those sort of like broader goals, and knowing that also we want to simplify, I think that it seems to me that most of the folks that are going to be using this information are going to be coming probably online. That's going to be their landing place. It's going to be some kind of website. So it seems to me that maybe it would be beneficial to our progress is to sort of create a very general outline of what is the content of that website. In the sense of, maybe there is a little bit of education, there might be some links, but just having a sense of what is the interface that people first come in on that website. So creating an outline of that. Out of that, there's going to be a link to a PDF that is going to become our guidelines that we are consolidating. My impression after reviewing both documents is that, as it was mentioned, there is a different, I don't know, typology to each one. One is already, the sustainability one is much more educational. And the other one, the tree manual that we have on the screen right now, it reads more like a tree ordinance. So I think it would be important to understand what are the, like, if developer does need to access all the information that is in the tree manual for preservation, where is that information? So our landing page should be very clear. If you are a homeowner resident, this is for you. If you're a developer and you are, you have a landscape architect or a professional working with you, this is where you want to go. So a very clear distinction between those users. So then we also have come across, there was early in the conversation, there was mention of quantification. I think that that's a very interesting question. Is like, how are there ways that are going to be implementable for people to quantify some of these things? I think that we can talk all day about native plants, but or water conservation, but if 90% of a garden is lawn, we're not getting there. We're not moving the needle. So I think that, you know, that's the kind of quantification that if we could encourage or however is more appropriate to say what is the quantification of how much should be shrubs, how much should be lawn, and etc. Maybe we can really start making some gains on water conservation. And the same goes for other aspects. I think that, you know, in terms of using native plants, there is a huge curve that we have to accomplish to get folks to go more in that direction. So if I've seen that in other cities in the region, when professionals use native plants, they get more points. And so that starts making a market for native plants. People start seeing them, they see how they're being used. And so that's a really good way also of quantifying how can native plants be used, and the fact that maybe, you know, having a trained eye, it helps to make those native plants more user-friendly and in the right conditions. So there is I would call it like a visual education, in addition to all the other education elements that we mentioned before. I think that's it, but quantification seems to me that is a very interesting question, how to do it in a way that is implementable, but it can really help achieve the goals.
Yes, ma'am.
As everybody was talking, me being the person that is going, okay, what kind of document are we going to put together here? I kind of put together, the name of this is Planting and Vegetation Guide, or whatever we want to call it. We have an overview, that section that is easy for our homeowners to understand, has links to various things. We have our goals for planting in Wildwood. What are our goals? What do we want to accomplish in the city of Wildwood when somebody's planting something? I think we need to define that. And then, as she was just talking about, some visual examples need to be laid out there with a picture or two of, here's some individual yardscapes, so that you don't see a yardscape like I see in my subdivision, where from the back of the house to the creek edge, it's nothing but grass. And then they wonder why the creek edge is falling off. For new subdivision or new developer stuff, we need to have some specific examples on, if you're going to develop in Wildwood, you better expect that you're going to have to put treescapes here, plantscapes there, and show some pictures of what we expect. And then for business building properties, like the section that we're sitting in here, what do we expect in the green space as we build out from this space? I would like to see more sections of sidewalk, rather than just sidewalk, have plantscapes in the middle of them or around them, so that we're not just building concrete after concrete. And then after you have that example, you list your invasive species, or you put a link to where the current invasive species list is for the state of Missouri. Then you've got a glossary of basic terms for planting guides. Then you've got our ordinances, and each one of those sections can be gotten to, boom, just click on this link and here's the ordinances if I want to go see ordinances, or here's where I go to see examples. But I'm kind of thinking if we build it that way, then it becomes one living, breathing document on the website, and we don't require that we have to print out everything.
I think that's the way that I've been envisioning this, listening
Yeah.
to it, is more like a document of documents.
Yeah.
You know, so that
uh-huh,
people can get to what they need to get to if they want to, but again, and if it's all individual documents, you can link it multiple places throughout, you know, and so therefore, anytime you have, you know, recommended plantings or something like that, you can link it
Yeah.
throughout the website, throughout whatever, as long as they're individual documents, and then they're
Yeah.
also user-friendly and printable.
I want to get back to philosophy for just a minute, because Katie made a superb point. It is the reason why we battled so long with the reserve. They just wouldn't catch on to the reality that, no, you can't pave everything but a creek, make the creek a ditch and expect the runoff to remain the same. And if you put in a couple of detention basins, they're barren patches of typically fescue, and it's just not gonna do the job that Wildwood deserves. And we fought that battle and fought that battle and fought that battle, and we kind of chipped around the edges a little bit, but the plan didn't substantially change. And so if we can accomplish one thing from the perspective of the developer's toolkit, is to do just that. You can get up to the creek, maybe lay the bank back some and plant some of the, do some of the bank retention work that we're, mandating other places, or that that is being required of us. Make the developers do that. But I wanted to tie that back in. I don't know if I can do it or not, but Maria and I are typically on the same page with these sorts of things. I think the sustainability problem is we have our work cut out for us, because people buy 3 acres in Wildwood, they knock down an acre of trees for their home and cut all the brush and replace it with bluegrass and fescue, which is terribly invasive. I mean, the fescue is horrible, but people want their little horse mini farm. And so we wind up with orchard grass and various, fescues, and they invade everywhere. And I think it's an uphill battle to try to get anybody to think that, well, maybe there's a better types of plantings, because it's more expensive to plant non-invasive grasses, and they don't grow as well and all those kinds of things. And so you're asking people to make a decision that's counter to what they really want, which is a horse pasture, in order to benefit Rockwood Reservation, which in their mind is doing fine because things are green.
Again, perspective of what I've heard. Two, we can't regulate that on
Yeah,
13,000
right,
properties.
right.
There's just not enough code
Yep.
enforcement officers or hours.
So we present the philosophy. That's what I'm
The
saying.
educational, which I again go back to, that seems to be the primary goal.
Yes.
Ms. Dodwell, that's kind of where we start.
Yep.
So I kind of want to go back to her list. Heard it. Spoke of an overview with links, goals for planting in Wildwood, visual example, new subdivisions, business buildings, list invasives or create that link or links, a glossary, the ordinances, and I added index. I think that could be beneficial as well. So from the perspective of the subcommittee members, what do you think of that list? And I know Ms. Dodwell supports it, but
Could you say it one more time? Could you go over your list one more time?
stealing Mrs. Dodwell's
That's
thunder.
okay.
Overview, that educational component is what I would maybe paraphrase it as, with links. Links to things that support that overview or that educational philosophy. Meaning here's science that says this is the way to do it. Goals for planting in Wildwood, I think, is a critical component. Here's why we think it's important you understand. Visual examples of yardscapes and things that have worked. Whether it be a city project where we went in and stopped erosion, or if it's some of the plantings in our parks or along our right of ways, et cetera. New subdivisions, we've talked to about developer examples and tree and plantscapes that work, business buildings, probably more green spaces and less concrete, or we go something to pervious. List of invasives or links to those invasives. Probably a few there that we know we just don't want. Only want. And a glossary, ordinances, and then an index.
Appendix would be the links you're talking about, would be the appendices.
Yes, it could be, instead of just the ordinances kind of piling up the thickness of the document, the ordinance could be just the links again
Mhm.
to our city's website or the way Maria's described this, and I think there's a reading on the part of the three council people. This becomes, I think Melanie said it too. Maybe it's, maybe we design it for the website and not a paper document.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
if you want sections of it, it's easy to print.
I,
Mhm.
just, if I could make just one suggestion about the ordinances. I would say that ordinances would go in another, in with other things. So if you had like, if you called it protocols or something, then that would take care of ordinances, the, like erosion,
I don't know, Teresa. I think
utilities,
I think if I'm a
easements.
builder, I want to find your ordinances fast.
So I can find ways around them.
Probably.
Well, those would be in there, but
Yeah.
I'm thinking that
Well, hey,
there's a lot of things in that.
I didn't give up my right to
Well,
free
then let's
speech,
work on the ordinances and making them tougher.
which is why I may not be here in April.
Well, ordinances and.
That could be part of this, right?
So what I would suggest is maybe at this stage, there is nothing that maybe we don't want it that way, maybe we do want it that way, but maybe that's why D2G design will show us what it looks like.
Mhm.
And maybe that's where we make the decision. Again, Christie is here to basically do this groundwork for us. I know you're all eager to jump in and do some things, but I think we ought to let them take it first and create that framework, the table of contents, whatever you want to call it. And then let us react to it. And then once we have the agreed upon list, then we can break it out, and those with interest in a certain area or areas can then take it from there and help our consultant team.
I think collaborating on the table of contents is the critical first step. One thing I
think
would
that's
suggest.
Exactly what Ms. Dodwell gave us.
Yeah.
That's
And
what-
I would suggest, though, that you consider as part of this kick table of contents, the reality that we have subdivisions where there are 10 homes per acre. And we also have a lot of our land is 3-acre minimums, and a lot of folks out there have, 20, 30, 40 acres. So there are gradations that are, I mean, there's a whole lot of difference between planting a garden in the back of your 10th acre lot behind your house and having 3 acres that you are set to landscape because you just built a home there. And so these people are going to require different resources, and they're going to have different approaches, and they're going to need to see the overarching philosophy of here's why we want to do, I'm not
Well,
as
then we
hung
have
up
a
on.
subset under the individual yard section that says
Yeah,
less
that's
than an
good, yeah.
acre.
Yeah.
1 to 5 acres, 5 to 20 acres, 20 to 100 acres.
But it also has to be part of the, the philosophy discussion.
Yeah.
Here's, why we want.
And I think Maria touched on it, and Maria, you jump in anytime. I wrote down the quantify, because that in my mind, if I take off my landscape architect hat and I just put on my resident hat, and then that might be the easiest way for me to identify how I'm moving in the right direction, is the big picture quantification of, I reduced my lawn by 50%. And
Less
stuff like
gas in the
that.
mower.
So
less
whether,
effort.
I have a 1/4 acre lot or a 10 acre lot, I can still apply that
Yeah.
to the same way.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Um,
That's a good point.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's exactly what I was gonna say, that she made, that was one of the top points I thought she made, was to give it measurement so that we can know how well we're doing in Wildwood, and that each one of the residents can know. And I don't know if you can put any stipulation on a developer, you can only have this much.
Actually, in some regards, that's the easiest place to stick it, so
Yeah.
to speak, because we have an ordinance and they're dependent on that ordinance to develop.
Mhm.
Obviously, you want it to be adversarial, but the educational tool would be as beneficial to them.
They're already used to Wildwood being adversarial in their opinions, so tough.
Right, and we won't have a problem. Can I want to make
Yeah,
another,
exactly.
another comment. I'm a tree guy, always have been. I love them. But I was in Chicago. I was probably in my 20s. In, you know, the biggest change for the smallest distance there is, I mean, Chicago, you know, one of the greatest cities in the world, 100-story buildings and all this kind of stuff. I'm walking along and I'm wanting to cut through this field. It's right there where the bean is now, that shiny thing. I'm cutting through this field and all of a sudden I'm looking around and it's just, I just think it's a weedy field, you know, that they were fixing to do a construction project on. Turns out it's restored meadow. And it was like one city block of restored meadow with a couple of paths crossing it. And it was spectacular. Flowers blooming everywhere and butterflies and bugs and so on and so forth. And that was an epiphany for me as a younger guy, because it doesn't have to be trees necessarily to be gorgeous.
Yeah.
And if people would have that sort of an epiphany, I think we'd have a lot less fescue and bluegrass lawns and a lot less mower noise and a lot, you know, of those kinds of things. And so figuring out how to inspire that kind of an aha moment is you know, a big piece of the philosophy.
It's all education.
Yeah.
You've all identified that multiple times.
Yeah, I guess I'm beating the horse to death, but
And I'm not criticizing that. I think that's just, I came into this meeting, we came into this meeting wanting to hear your goals for the document. And we've taken that and we've gotten what I believe is the table of contents. I'd like to assign that to DG2, our consultant, to basically take those thoughts, start building on those. And that will be the product of our next meeting.
Yep. And so I haven't shared this with you, but I'll kind of share it, and you're not going to be able to see it, but we did put together a project schedule as part of our scope outline to kind of help you, and it's right in line with get it done by end of March. So how DD2 is planning on approaching this is all of November is what we call collecting. We're collecting all of this data. We're reviewing the documents. We've already pulled some other examples. That Springfield one is good, but we also, Maria has a friend who did two very similar kind of requests, I think, out in California. So different area, but kind of a similar breakdown. So we're collecting and kind of looking through everything. Then December is when we're envisioning. We're coming up with all these ideas and kind of breaking them out into our whiteboard sort of.
We'll have a
thing.
whiteboard by then because it'll only take us a couple of months to get that hung up.
So then we can post on the whiteboard.
Well,
I'll go buy the whiteboard. I'll hang it up next week.
Then January to mid-February is what we call synthesizing. It's taking all the feedback and working through it all. And then March, or end of February to March, is the documentation pulling together. I know we have a graphic designer on board to do kind of book stuff. I don't know if she also knows the website as well, or if we need to have an additional.
You would say, Joe?
Stacy Minkoff.
Okay, yeah.
The history book.
Yeah.
So she has a good eye both off our websites as well as.
Yeah, Stacy can do website stuff. I just was curious.
So that would be good then, so that we're thinking primarily probably website, but there's also could be handouts. And then as we move through this, we'll think about that kind of marketing thing, because like I said, if we create this fantastic tool that, you know, Wildwood wants to be on the front end of this and getting this, then you gotta celebrate it and get people excited about it. So then what does that marketing component come into? We'll put some thought to that as well. Is so that it's a success overall.
So we've got about 5 minutes and several things to conclude with. So in terms of an assignment, acknowledging your project timeline, I think the next meeting, we'd like to see the table of contents in draft form. maybe embellishing on those topics a little bit, so there's you've taken those general ideas and you basically put them. I would ask you, Maria, if you have some examples of other locations beyond Springfield. Ms. Dowell is going to be kind enough to leave the Springfield one. I'm gonna send that out to everybody so they can see it. If we could get those, so we could start looking at them as well, formulate maybe if that's what we're thinking or not. And so the next meeting would be to go over that outline, table of contents, whatever you believe it to be in terms of the title. And then from there, we can kind of jump, and you'll have the project schedule for us by then finalized, right? Okay. I think there's a lot of work there, so maybe 3 weeks before our next meeting. Something like that.
We talked about, are we just gonna do a reoccurring 4 o'clock every 3 weeks?
That's what I thought.
Could we do that? And then I'll put it on my calendar, because this one almost squeaked through my calendar till I got your email yesterday, and I was like, oh, I didn't put that on the calendar.
So is that okay with all of you?
Sure.
I
Yeah.
think having a recurring meeting keeps our kind of feet to the fire.
Yeah.
It keeps us thinking about the subject instead of taking long pauses.
Can we get an early draft of the table of contents so we can kind of work on it and, you know, I
Counting
mean,
on Christie being much more prompt than I am of late, so yeah.
well,
So-
just the collaboration is, I think, key for that piece.
Mhm.
for that.
Mhm.
So
And I was trying to see, did this work? You can see where I've typed a comment, Melanie, and maybe you type a comment and I'll see if it pops up on mine. This is just Adobe, but you don't have to have Acrobat to comment on there. But I just put a note on the cover just to see if, or we can use that
Right
365,
here, save a
but
little
yep,
bit.
yep. So if
And I can reply to that by clicking here.
So then if Teresa has a comment and then I disagree with it or something, I could say, hey, you know, that's a great idea, but, and then I could comment back. So we could have some dialogue. We could share our table of contents this way, and then you guys could comment on that as well.
So we have, the only caution is the city gave us pads and it didn't register on me until I complained about all our printouts and realized that the pads were passed out before I joined the council. And the purpose for the pads was to reduce the printing. And I was complaining about printing with a pad in my hand. And so we do have pads and we have Office Online. And so if we can do the Office version of the Adobe Acrobat, unless we have a license, a city license.
Travis,
You don't have to have,
Yeah.
you don't have to have
to do the
Adobe.
comments.
I just send it to your email and it pulls up in a browser like this.
Oh, okay.
And then you don't have to have a copy of Adobe Acrobat.
And it close it down, and then when we open it up, all the comments are there and all that kind of stuff. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, that's great. That couldn't be better. That's
so 3 weeks is November 14th. It's a Tuesday, 4 o'clock again.
Teresa will have a birthday cake for me because the next day is my birthday. Oh, jeez.
That and a whiteboard.
I assume you'll give her more details on what you want as well.
No, you do have
I've
plenty
never
of
had the
parts
bad,
that night.
What's that?
That's at 6:30, so.
Okay.
It's not as, it won't be as pressed tonight. I apologize.
Yeah,
When we set this meeting date, I didn't realize that they were going to have a second Administration Public Works Committee this month.
yeah.
So November 14th at 4 p.m.
Got it.
And what the department will send around is the examples that Mr. Dwyer provides, along with what Ms. Dobble brought for you.
Which I'll send to you here in a moment.
Thank you. And then Mr. Dwyer will, along with Maria, will be working on formalizing that list that Ms. Dobble provide us and adding some, let's say, meat to the bones. And then from there, at the next meeting, once we have that, I'm gonna kind of shut up and let Mr. Dwyer take the meeting from there on in. So since she has developed the table of contents.
You can call me Christy.
Good luck.
You can tell them that all
So
day long.
I can
You
explain
still do it? Okay, I just feel like he calls her Maria.
He does, he does. That's the only person I've ever heard him call by the first name,
I know.
Maria.
Forgot her last name.
It's okay, I don't mind. I don't.
Any last thoughts before we close? Yes, ma'am.
There was one thing I was gonna ask if we should put in there on the table of contents, but I didn't get to get that out. But, should we have something in there that has like a plant selection criteria? So that people can go through and go, okay, I've got to think about invasive. I've got it, because Rob was talking about, one of the developments and problems we had. Should I think about erosion? Should I think about the tree canopies? Should I think all of the things that you would think about for the selection, not just which one to select, but how to select?
I think that's probably in the introduction, in the philosophy
Yeah, yeah,
side
yeah,
of it,
Yeah.
but,
Mhm.
but keep-
Listing
we'll keep a
helps.
note of that. Yes, almost like a mini checklist.
Right.
So you have the
Mhm.
big why, but then maybe in the little corner, we've got to pull out that says, remember, these are, so if somebody is.
Or those
somebody
things
is
that we're
at Home
passing out.
Depot and they
those things that we're
quickly get
passing
to a
out to our
little
community.
square on their web or on their phone that says, okay, does this one do X, Y, and Z?
Yeah.
Maybe that's,
Yeah.
I'd like a motion to adjourn. Lauren,
Motion, second.
second by Ms. Dodwell. Objection?
Nope.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you all. We'll see you on November 30th.
This was great. It was kind of messy, but
Not
very good, very good.